The Opera desktop browser, with its integrated messaging apps and AI features, gives the impression of navigating an internet from the future. Stick with me, and I'll explain why towards the end of the video. In eastern Britain resides a tribe known as the Iceni. Their people inhabit villages perched on slopes or are sparsely settled along the borders of wind-swept fields. Their loyalty is to their king, Prasatagus. Warfare, a constant presence in their land, has honed the bravery of his warriors. Yet the sight of marching legions and foreign banners now invading their countryside brings a sense of inevitability. Some tribes have surrendered without a fight, while others have been subdued by the sword. The aging Prasatagus, unwilling to openly challenge the mighty empire that has conquered so much, declares that his kingdom will be divided between the Romans and his two daughters upon his death. However, when the king passes away, his daughters are not crowned as rulers. The Romans seize the lands of the Icenian nobles and violate the deceased king's estate. They assault his daughters and drag his widow out, binding her to a post and flogging her. This is the tragic fate of Boudica, the queen of the Iceni, who is left broken in a pool of her own blood. The first Roman invasion of Britain was led by Julius Caesar in 55 and 54 BC, scattering the coastal tribes. However, it was not until 43 AD under Emperor Claudius that the conquest truly began. The Romans, who occupy Britain, view its preliterate inhabitants as savage and barbaric, prone to violent tendencies and steeped in ancient superstitions that need to be subdued by the advancing forces of Rome. The righteousness of this mission is bolstered by the splendor of the Eternal City and its vast empire. Rome, founded on the legendary tale of Romulus and enriched by stories of its ancient gods, radiates a certain brilliance. It has erected magnificent monuments, constructed impressive aqueducts, and fostered philosophers of ethics, logic, and nature, along with great artists and exceptional warriors. Yet, much of Rome's prosperity stems from its violent conquests and the enslavement of those it has conquered. Now, the empire finds itself under the unpredictable rule of the young Emperor Nero. In Britain, the Roman governor, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, is currently engaged on the Isle of Mona, where he is crushing the stronghold of the Druid priesthood. Meanwhile, far away, Queen Boudica, her back torn from brutal flogging, rises to rally her people. Contrary to the Roman perspective, the tribes of Britain are not simple or primitive. They are complex societies with established cultural and trade connections to the continent, alongside rich oral traditions and expertise in metalworking, farming, and pastoralism. Boudica understands that many other chieftains have chosen to submit to Roman rule in order to preserve their tribal hierarchies under imperial authority. However, her distrust of the Romans is shared by another tribe, the Trinovans. The Trinovans had long inhabited the city of Camulodunum, but the Romans forcibly displaced its people, building a fortress and later a lavish Roman colony in its place. Thus, the Trinovans, alongside the Iceni, march in support of Queen Boudica. The motivations behind this revolt may also stem from the economic pressures of Roman rule, including heavy taxes and growing debts owed to Roman citizens. The exact reasons for the uprising remain somewhat unclear, as our knowledge of it primarily comes from two ancient historians, Tacitus, writing around 100 AD, and Cassius Dio, writing around 200 AD. Tacitus likely relied on eyewitness accounts, as his father-in-law, Agricola, served in Britain during the revolt and later became its governor. Dio, on the other hand, appears to have had access to earlier sources that have since been lost. Both Tacitus and Cassius Dio, however, are known to embellish speeches in their writings to reflect contemporary political critiques of the Roman Empire. And to some degree, both portray the Britons as a persecuted, yet still savage people. Nevertheless, the very real fury of Boudica and her rebel army soon reaches the well-constructed homes and grand streets of Camulodunum. The air fills with the deafening sound of horns and battle cries, as the colony is engulfed in a violent scene of plunder and slaughter. The town's garrison, along with a poorly prepared Roman relief force of just 200 soldiers, retreats to the temple of Claudius. They managed to hold their ground for 2 days before being utterly overwhelmed and annihilated by the British warriors. Dio writes that the rebels, in their fury, mutilate and sacrifice captured civilians, with disturbing images of Roman women impaled on skewers. While such claims of sacrifice and sadism should be taken with caution, there is tangible evidence of destruction. A thick layer of ash and the remains of a once thriving colony indicate the complete annihilation of Camulodunum and its inhabitants. The Roman Ninth Legion marches out to relieve the town, but Boudicca's army meets them head-on, decisively wiping out the Roman infantry, while the cavalry retreats in disarray. The collapse of Roman authority in Britain has begun. In a desperate race across the island, Governor Suetonius arrives at Londinium, modern-day London, where panicked citizens beg for his protection. However, he refuses to risk a final stand in the city. Those who can escape, including soldiers, flee with the army, while the elderly, the frail, and those unwilling to leave are left behind to face the rebels. As the insurgents arrive, they methodically burn the town, one house at a time. Tacitus reports that the Roman town of Verulamium, modern St. Albans, also falls to the rebels, and Dio claims that in total, 80,000 Romans and their allies perish, leading to the loss of the island to Rome. The fact that all this destruction was wrought by a woman, Queen Boudicca, was particularly humiliating for the Romans. Suetonius can delay no longer. He assembles an army of 10,000 men at the edge of a dense forest where he watches the rebel forces flood the plain. Wave after wave of warriors chant war cries as they beat their shields with spears and swords, charging forward in their chariots. Tens of thousands of rebels have gathered, united under the banner of Queen Boudicca, determined to overthrow the power of Rome. Behind them, a line of wagons holds the women of the tribes, who, certain of victory, have come to watch the battle unfold. Suetonius, leading his troops, addresses his soldiers. According to Dio, he reminds them of their identity as Romans, favored by the gods and rulers of the world. He recalls the atrocities committed by the rebels, the burned cities, the slain countrymen, and warns that surrender will not be met with mercy. He tells them that it is better to fall in battle with honor than to be captured and subjected to the horrific fate of being impaled, with their entrails ripped from their bodies. Let us either conquer or die here, he declares. Britain will stand as a noble monument to us, even if all other Romans are driven out, for our bodies will forever belong to this land. Meanwhile, Boudicca rides at the head of her forces, in a chariot, rallying her warriors. She condemns the cowardice and greed of the Romans, and Tacitus records her impassioned speech. I do not avenge as a woman descended from noble blood, but as one of the people. I seek revenge for lost freedom, for my scourged body, for the outraged chastity of my daughters. Roman lust has gone so far that not even age nor virginity is spared. With a deafening roar of battle cries, the two armies collide. Javelins pierce flesh, chariots shatter, and swords cut through bodies. The Roman wedge formation breaks the rebel lines, and chaos erupts on the battlefield. Shields, blades, blood, and the dead litter the plain. The rebels, overwhelmed, begin to flee. However, they are trapped by the line of wagons, and are mercilessly pursued and slaughtered by the Romans, their numbers falling by the thousands. Tacitus writes that the Roman troops showed no mercy, even to the women among the rebels. The baggage animals were also speared and added to the growing pile of bodies. The surviving rebels, including Boudicca, managed to escape, planning to regroup and renew the revolt. However, their numbers are dwindling, as is Boudicca's strength. Eventually, the rebel queen dies, whether by poison, injury, or disease is unclear. The Britons mourn her deeply and give her a costly burial, but with her death, a sense of final defeat settles in. The remaining rebels scatter back to their homes. Suetonius, having quelled the rebellion, enacts widespread punishments on the people of Britain, rooting out any lingering dissent. Emperor Nero, fearful that further persecution might spark another uprising, replaces Suetonius with a more conciliatory governor. Not out of mercy, but out of concern for the stability of the empire. Yet, in the heart of the empire, Nero soon faces another challenge to Roman authority. It is believed that Nero accuses a group of dissidents, whom the crowd calls Christians, of starting the Great Fire of Rome. Tacitus records that Nero punished these individuals with unspeakable cruelty. The Christians, reviled for their vices, had been followers of Christus, the founder of the sect, who had been executed under Emperor Tiberius by the procurator Pontius Pilate. The so-called pernicious superstition had been suppressed for a time, but it resurged not only in Judea, where it originated, but in the very heart of the empire, Rome itself. Tacitus notes that those who confessed to being Christians were arrested and vast numbers were convicted. They were dressed in the skins of wild beasts and torn apart by dogs, or they were nailed to crosses and, when night fell, set alight to serve as human torches in Nero's garden. This horrific spectacle was held for public amusement. For Nero, subjugation and conquest were not just political strategies, but essential elements of the empire's power, relentless, cruel, and pervasive. With the revolt in Britain quelled, the Romans set about rebuilding Londinium, transforming it into a sprawling capital, and establishing a new town on the lands once held by the Iceni. The Roman presence in Britain endured long after Nero's death, lasting for 3 more centuries. Over time, Boudicca's legacy faded into distant memory, becoming a vague and forgotten figure for many. Her story, however, was later reimagined and embellished in annals, poems, and plays from the medieval period onward. British audiences saw her in various lights, sometimes as a barbaric butcher, a symbol of ancestral shame, or as a patriot and an embodiment of female strength. In some portrayals, she is cast as an anti-imperial hero, while in others, she is seen as the martyred mother of the British Empire. Yet much as it had been during Roman times, the image of Boudica was not one of detailed relief, but rather a reflection of those who told her story. Switching gears a bit, I'm always getting lost in rabbit holes about ancient Britain, the Aztecs, or whatever random topic catches my attention. Lately, I've been saving so much time using the Opera desktop browser. It's the first browser to feature integrated generative AI tools, and ChatGPT is literally built right into the sidebar. So, if I stumble upon an article about an archaeological discovery but don't have time to read it all, I can just get the main idea instantly. One of the reasons Opera feels so easy to use is that it syncs all your bookmarks and passwords from your old browser right away. Plus, it comes with services I already use like a free VPN and an ad blocker. And the best part? You can customize the look with beautiful wallpapers. Oh, and I can't stand having a ton of windows open with vaguely related tabs. Thankfully, Opera's pinboard feature lets me group links, pictures, and notes together, so I can easily return to them and even share them. I've actually compiled my favorite Mongol art and quotes in one place.